I don't want to be here right now. You want to be here? Do you want to be here right now? Ask yourself that question. Do you want to be here right now? I don't. I don't want to be here. Look, it's beautiful outside. Shouldn't be here right now. Why am I doing this? Stupid, 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 stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Dude, why can't we just figure it out? The tactics are just so dead. I'm trying to piece together what the fucking situation is. But I can't. I can't for the life of me figure it out, man. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Craig Cochran Football Channel. My name is Craig Cochran and those were snippets of videos that I recorded following Liverpool's losses to Galatasaray and to Chelsea a few weeks back, where I recorded both videos immediately following those losses because I wanted to make a reaction video sort of like I did with that Crystal Palace game. During my editing of the Galatasaray video, I got randomly way more swamped with my day job than I ever have been since I started working there. So I unfortunately had to dial back a little bit of my time on my computer just to save my sanity. I was kind of losing it. And then with the Chelsea match just 4 days after, I figured I'd just shoot a video for that. And then following that Chelsea match, I finished my recording. I got a quarter of the way through my editing, and then a really cool little opportunity came up for me. Which pulled a lot of my time and my focus away from finalizing the edit, and by the time that I had finished everything stemming from the opportunity, I kind of just assumed nobody in the Liverpool fan base really wanted another video from somebody detailing the now 3 consecutive losses. So I decided to give it a little bit of a breather during this international break because I thought that it would probably be a bit less hectic amidst all the life happenings going on, and probably a lot more fun just to organize and shoot a comprehensive Liverpool look around and look ahead video, because boy oh boy is there a lot to discuss before we look ahead to Manchester United on the weekend. But in the spirit of looking ahead, I feel that also requires us to reflect quite a bit back so we can have a little bit of comparison, especially between this current iteration of the team and the team that won the Premier League last season. What did Matthew McConaughey say in those super weird Lincoln commercials?
Sometimes you gotta go back to actually move forward.
So, let's go over to the tactical board, get out of this horror show lighting situation, and make a little bit of a meal of it, shall we? Ah, fuck. Yeah, that looks good. All right, back to it. In front of us now is how Liverpool is typically lining up in games to start this season, as if there even has been a typical, with the amount of knocks our players have had and the number of positional rotations we've been making. But yeah, I digress. We're seeing Liverpool trotting out a 4-2-3-1, which for those who do not know, might not seem so much different to that 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1 that Liverpool liked to line up in a bunch last season. But the structure on the pitch is vastly different, and the individual players within that system, assuming the structure, seem a bit uncomfortable in comparison to how they are used to playing. Obviously, the most notable difference is the true use of a number 10 in Florian Wirtz, which we'll cover later in this video, but one of the other primary differences in the structure here is the width of these wingers right here. Now listen, I think if we're looking at last season reflectively, there are a few very glaring, very notable differences regarding the way the team is currently structured and the way players are currently performing. However, I do think the biggest difference so far from an individual player perspective is the way Mohamed Salah, the now much wider right winger, is being used and therefore performing within this side. Also, before I even begin talking about those differences, I just want to say that expecting anybody, even someone like Mohamed Salah, to have a similar output to the season that he had last season, a season which he registered the most goal involvements in a Premier League season ever, would be an extremely huge ask, and probably pretty unfair to do, as he is now a year older and the mileage is piled up and he's working with new teammates and still grieving the loss of a best mate. Need I say more? But still, for many people in this space, singing to the high heavens about the Mo Salah downfall without considering a lot of the extenuating circumstances I just mentioned, the fact still does kind of stand. Mohamed Salah has not been at the obscene levels we saw from him last season. And I actually think that's a perfect takeoff point for this entire Liverpool look around and look ahead conversation, because I personally can't help but think that Mohamed Salah's situation is really kind of a microcosm for the entire team as of late. So despite it being a bit unfair given the team overhaul with departures and arrivals and the tragedy from the summer, and just the fact that it's really, really hard to acclimate to an entirely new set of superstar teammates, while also shouldering the expectations that I mentioned, let's just dive into that whole thing, starting with Mohamed Salah. Here we're looking at a heat map of Mohamed Salah in one of his average matches from last season. And by average, I quite literally mean one in which he registered a goal and an assist, which is bonkers. But yeah, this is a heat map from one of those games. And now this is a heat map from another one of those games. And now another. Are you noticing anything? Yes, shocker. Mohamed Salah, a crafty, goal-scoring and facilitating threat, really likes getting the ball right in this spot, right on the corner of that 18-yard box where he can do just about wherever he wants. And most importantly, not have to expend a tremendous amount of energy to do so. Dribble in front of the defender toward the goal line to put in a cross in front of the keeper? Sure, why not? Cut in off of his left foot and deliver a top corner goal. Seen that a trillion times, it feels like. Or what about one of those like cute little Trivela passes he pulls out of his pocket like a magician's rabbit? You get what I'm getting at here. Mohamed Salah is really fucking good at this spot right here on the pitch. Now, let's look at a heat map from his best Premier League game this season. And now a heat map from one of his average games this campaign, which obviously being average will look very similar to many of the other fixtures Liverpool has played across all competitions this season. And another one just to say that I did it. For those with eyeballs, yes, we are seeing the same exact thing. Essentially what has happened is Mohamed Salah, seemingly by managerial design, is deeper on the pitch, closer to that touchline, and very infrequently in or around the box. And I, like many others, have little idea why. Well, that's not entirely true. We know a little bit of it has to do with the implementation of Florian Wirtz, Hugo Ekitike, Alexander Isak. All of these guys are occupying touches, occupying spaces that Mohamed Salah otherwise can be involved in. We also know the press looks a lot different this year than it did last season, and that is not in a good way. So Mohamed Salah being up here is a little bit confusing. We also lost Trent Alexander-Arnold in behind Mohamed Salah, who is so good at getting Mo the ball in those effective spots and also not marauding into these spots that Mohamed Salah really likes being in, which is something we're seeing with the current right back situation. And that's having a much bigger impact than many fans would care to admit. But we can get into that in a little bit. Not like the situation itself, but just the lack of having a guy like Trent back there. Nevertheless, Mohamed Salah's usage this season has just been plain different in comparison to what we're used to, and the stats do more than enough to back that up. Of his nearly 45 touches per game last season, 9.5 of them came within the opposition's box, so roughly 21% of all his touches saw him in a direct position to at least scare like a little bit of piss out of his opponent. In comparison, Mohamed Salah is averaging 5 less total touches this season, and less than 5 of those 40 touches are in the opposition's box, bringing him closer to about 12% of his touches being in the box this season. That tells us that comparatively, Mohamed Salah is in a dangerous position with the ball at his feet half the amount of time he was last season. He's also attempting 1.5 shots per game this season compared to roughly 3.25 last season, which is more than a 50% drop-off. What's even more alarming, though, are the chances he is getting can hardly be considered quality ones. One quick glance at his non-penalty XG from last season of 0.49 and his non-penalty XG from this season of 0.17, and if you just watch the games with your eyeballs that we've already clarified you do indeed have in your head, you'll probably come to the realization that by all metrics and by all eyeballs, Mohamed Salah is forcing it a little bit right now. Also consider as just 1 of 11 completed dribbles this season, and we can add that all up and arrives to someone who is greatly struggling to match his impossible to reach levels from last season. And that's okay. Like I said, can't really expect that from him. It's a pretty simple conclusion to make though, right? But the question it leads to is much more complicated. Is all of this actually on Mohamed Salah? Sure, he's a year older. Sure, he has a lot more miles on the tires. And yes, he did lose a best mate along with the rest of his team this summer. But we also just saw Mohamed Salah score 2 goals against an extremely low block during the international break, mind you, while he was being used in his favored manner, in and around this corner box spot. So to answer that question, yeah, his struggle probably does have a little bit to do with all those previously mentioned circumstances, but after looking at handfuls of stats and looking at heat maps and just using the all-important eye test every single match day, I think it's pretty safe to say that his drop in performance does boil down more to his positioning and usage within the side than anything else, which is why I mentioned at the beginning of this video that Mohamed Salah is a perfect microcosm for this Liverpool team. Because if you look at the rest of the pitch, and especially the players now directly surrounding Mohamed Salah on that pitch, it feels as though all of the struggles boil down to those two things: positioning and usage. So let's just move Mohamed Salah inwards into his favorite part of the pitch, because I think all of us can probably agree that any 33-year-old winger in the Premier League, no matter what their accolades are, is likely better off being in a more central position, like, you know, I don't know, right here in this half space. They're probably better off being in that position where they're not having to dribble head on at a hyper-athletic fullback from 35 yards out right here, and then being met by another defender right in this spot right here, if that 33-year-old does so happen to beat that fullback off the dribble, which we're not seeing very much of. And since we're already on that right side of the pitch, let's stay over there and talk about Conor Bradley, Jeremie Frimpong, and Dominic Szoboszlai. But first I want to mention that we're kind of lumping Szoboszlai into this conversation because my opinion on him is real simple. He needs to remain a right-sided 8 and only flow out of this position right here, being in this spot, these little channels over on the touchline, coming middle, kind of coming into the middle and the back, dropping deep if he has to. He should only be out of this position if we're spelling somebody else like Wirtz in the 10 or Bradley or Frimpong at right back for like 10 or 15 minutes at the end of a match. Szoboszlai has forged a great relationship with Mohamed Salah on that right-hand side over the last couple of seasons, and with Trent being out of the side, we need Szoboszlai to not only maintain some of that semblance of normalcy for Salah in possession to get him the ball at his appropriate spots, but we especially need him to provide Mo with that support out of possession as well. Mo's agreement with Arne last season, for instance, to play higher up the pitch and not be involved a lot in the press, conserved Mo's energy and allowed him to have the astronomical output that he had. I think we all know this. But with Mohamed Salah being a little bit deeper on the pitch right now because of this 4-2-3-1 system, with him being a bit deeper up the pitch and more toward the touchline as we mentioned, this is forcing him to exert slightly more energy defensively and just putting Liverpool in awkward positions in the press in general. It's especially noticeable because Liverpool are also missing much on the personnel up front with the losses of Luis Diaz and Darwin Nunez to other clubs and of course tragically Diogo Jota. Szoboszlai, however, is the roadrunner right now that really is needed in this right-hand-sided 8 role, playing box-to-box, moving up in the press when need be, and probably even playing slightly more defensively as a ball winner than he's probably used to. The offensive firepower that we have up front, it's already there. We know that. The talent is there. So Dom maintaining this do-it-all nature in this role would be enormous. And then any offense that Szoboszlai is able to provide is just icing on the cake. So I feel like Szoboszlai really does need to stay here, contribute offensively when he can, especially against low blocks. And I think many would probably agree with that because he has been one of the most consistent players on this side so far, despite not even being deployed in a consistent way. So just like enormous props to him. And now that we've got this handsome son of a bitch out of the way, let's discuss the Bradley and Frimpong situation. Unfortunately, neither of those players have been fully up to the standards that handsome son of a bitch we just mentioned has been this season. Unfortunately, they haven't really been able to be fair. Bradley didn't have much of a preseason at all. Jeremie Frimpong has dealt with nagging injuries, and when they have been on the pitch, they've kind of both been a bit hampered. Hence why Szoboszlai was playing in that right back position so frequently to start the season. I also think, just to go back to Szoboszlai really quickly, I also think retrospectively, it feels like he was excelling in that right back role by comparison because he offered something that Bradley and Frimpong just don't offer at the moment, and that's more confident ball progression via passing, which is probably Liverpool's primary issue on the pitch at the moment, which if you'll see over in my takeaways right over here, Number one, poor progressive passing during buildup. That's the number one issue. But with Bradley and Frimpong needing to take that right back position for their own, we need to look at what both are able to offer and not what they don't offer at the moment. Conor Bradley is certainly known as a more defensive option than Jeremie Frimpong, and while his form has been off to start this season, I think we all look forward to seeing him round into shape because we did see last season both strong defensive and offensive contributions from him. This season, however, if we look at this heat map, we can kind of see that Conor Bradley is being used regularly as a Konate outlet a little bit further up the pitch, which has put Ibu in some uncomfortable isolated positions back here. He's also regularly in combination with Szoboszlai, which is great, occasionally Mohamed Salah down that touchline as well, but I'm noticing that there just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect in possession. There's just been a little bit of sloppiness. Bradley's kind of given the ball away a few times. There just seems to be a little bit of a disconnect. Bradley is also making a lot of underlapping runs like this in the midfield where he's not really cutting outside of Mohamed Salah where Salah's driving in. But Salah's maintaining the width quite a bit, and Bradley's doing these undercut runs in front of Mohamed Salah, which I personally think should be the complete opposite. I'm not really a big fan of this. I think it kind of puts guys in uncomfortable positions. So we're seeing a lot of these underlapping runs with Salah holding width. And to go back to what we discussed earlier, that just seems like a totally ineffective use of Mohamed Salah, especially at this stage of his career. Because of this positioning, when we do get dispossessed, Conor Bradley's finding himself a step behind his marked man, which you'll see right here because he's driving forward and his marked man is somewhere in this spot right here. So he's finding himself a step behind his marked man on a regular basis, thus leading to his impending needed aggression to get back and defend into the play, and therefore his yellow cards that have piled up, which has been Arne Slot's trigger this season to pull him off the pitch. And then on the flip side, we have Jeremie Frimpong, that little spark plug, who's played only 86 total Premier League minutes this season, but around 300 total minutes for the club. He offers an entirely different dynamic offensively, but puts the club in similarly daunting defensive situations as Bradley does. So let's look at his heat maps, the first being his 86 total Premier League minutes, and the second being his 120 minutes in the Champions League. With how high Jeremie Frimpong likes to drive up the pitch to carry the ball and participate in link-up play on the touchline with guys like Szoboszlai, guys like Wirtz, guys like Salah, a lot of the time they'll drift over. Wirtz and Frimpong have a really good relationship dating back to their time at Leverkusen together. They have a lot of chemistry. So Frimpong, I'm totally comfortable with him driving forward, being on this touchline, being in link-up play with these guys and making these underlapping runs with Mohamed Salah because it allows Mohamed Salah to drive a little bit closer in and Frimpong to maintain the width, which is just something we're not seeing out of the Bradley dynamic with Salah yet. But look at all these gaps here if Frimpong or somebody else does get dispossessed while Frimpong's driving forward. There's a tremendous amount of space right here, and unfortunately, a lot of guys are currently getting dispossessed. There's a lot of lacking form, there's a lot of lacking rhythm, there's not a lot of cohesion within the side. Players are like one step behind or a half step forward. Their brains are moving faster than their bodies are allowing them to. So you're seeing a lot of sloppiness in the midfield and on these touchlines. And these dispossessions, they are relatively common as he's adapting to the pace and the physicality of the league. Sometimes I am very okay with that. With great recovery speed, naturally is going to come blistering pace on the ball, which Frimpong obviously has in droves. That's why we signed him. And therefore, he's able to keep defenders more so on their toes because of it. And with that being the case, it just adds an added dynamic to the offense. His overlaps with Mohamed Salah also show Salah is able to play a little bit more closer in, which I just said, which is exactly where we want him to be. Again, that's really good when he's in this little space right here. And Frimpong has already shown us that he has that little like blooping cross in his locker, which is going to lead to more goals for the club with the talent that we have up front. Unfortunately, however, with the struggles of Ibrahima Konate back here this season, as I mentioned a little bit, that vacated right side has become an extremely targeted area, kind of like it was when Trent was playing in that role, but this year it feels way more magnified. Like I mentioned, both Frimpong and Conor Bradley are finding themselves to be susceptible to drifting up high, getting caught in weird spots, thus putting Ibrahima Konate in very uncomfortable, isolated situations. However, the main difference from last season and this season in that position is that Trent, let's just put this little guy over here as Trent. He's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold today. How's that sound? I don't want to put a Trent Alexander-Arnold name or a number 66. I think that feels right, right? But the biggest thing with Trent last season is instead of doing these like really big underlapping or overlapping runs where he's going in front of Salah or behind Salah, what Trent was doing a lot of the time was he was just drifting into this midfield position, and Szoboszlai was the guy that was kind of moving more forward. So Trent was able to be a progressor of the ball within that midfield, and because of that, because of his positioning, he was able to get back and defend a little bit easier. Not saying he was a great defender, but him being there provided Ibu with just a little bit of cushion, which is something that is not happening right now as Bradley and Frimpong are so high up the pitch. What Trent was amazing at was he covered up Ibu's deficiencies in ball progression, rapid thinking, comfortability on the ball, all of those things, by providing a nearby outlet that was close enough to Ibu where Ibu could make a confident pass delivered to Trent, and then Trent could find a receiver of that pass in any situation, thus taking immediate pressure off of Ibu, not really having to put him in any uncomfortable transitional moments because Trent was so secure with that ball. Now sure, Trent did have his defensive struggles, but he would just step into this position right here, Szoboszlai would step up a little bit, and you would just be able to get back easily, much more easily at least, defensively. And not only that, but Trent had Szoboszlai while Trent was in these positions. He had Szoboszlai to track back with him to allow just a little bit more cushion, a little bit more recovery. But the biggest thing was that Trent was a natural quick mover of that ball, who bailed Konate's own poor positioning out on multiple occasions with his ability to deliver quick, accurate passes. Liverpool, quite frankly, are greatly missing that this season because their two right backs have shown they're way more progressive ball carriers who clearly like to carry it way further up the pitch rather than being an outright passing progressor who chooses to tuck more into a safer, more pitch controlling spot like Trent did. And because of this, Konate is by proxy being asked more so to be one of those line breakers in the back. And we have unfortunately seen that when under pressure, which is most of the time, unfortunately, because teams are tagging up on him, Ibu's not the most decisive passer of the ball. He's not the most technically sound passer of the ball, and nor is he the safest passer of the ball. You combine that with the fact that Bradley and Frimpong start higher up the pitch, and even when they aren't higher up the pitch, the latter is not much of a defender regardless, and the former just has not been in proper form to offer any defensive mindedness he was able to provide in spades last season. And you unfortunately end up getting a pretty unbalanced equation where Ibrahima Konate is just regularly isolated with strong attackers and has to rely solely on his and his goalkeeper's skill to prevent disaster. It's also one of those situations where, from my eyes' perspective at least, it feels as though these are compounding issues based on the lack of confidence in the side and overall confusion within the side as well. It feels like when one of these instances happens, especially with Ibu, it's never long after the first one happening that we see it happen again, and I feel like that is because the players, and again in this instance Ibrahima Konate, are just lacking confidence in the moment and are almost fearful of being put in these uncomfortable positions because they're so used to it right now. And I'm not saying Ibu's been failed by his manager, nor am I saying he's been good otherwise this season, because one, Slot is still adapting to his new chest of toys, which he should figure out in due time, and two, Ibrahima Konate has frankly been a bit rubbish this season, only really having like a solid Ibu-like performance against Arsenal, but like Arsenal was playing with very little sense of offensive urgency, so I don't even know how much I can consider that a vintage Ibu game. You know what I mean? I just feel like with the Real Madrid rumors, with the lack of ball progression at the back, with the uncomfortable positioning and the inconsistency of his right back, his seemingly dwindling confidence by the week, and now his apparent muscular injury, which he was sent home from international duty with, we're kind of looking dead in the eyes at a really weird situation, especially with Giovanni Leone being out for the season and Joe Gomez being the only fit center back in the squad at the moment. To address any Joe Gomez should start theory crafters, by the way, no, he shouldn't. Joe Gomez should not be starting, guys. He's not fit enough, nor is he in a good enough rhythm or form. So with our lack of depth, Ibu is our best option at the moment, unfortunately. And we should continue to give him that starting nod to try to build cohesion rather than switching everything up yet again. That said, I do think Joe Gomez needs to be worked into rotations to get him up to speed because he has looked a bit corpse-ish out there. His usage this season's been super minimal, and his performances have therefore left much to be desired, so him getting into the side more is just going to benefit him and us in the long term. By this point, you're probably realizing that we have issues everywhere on the pitch that blend into other issues that create other issues, and you would be correct in that notion. But this is where we get our first real break, because on the conversation of Virgil van Dijk, I have very, very, very little to say. I kind of just want to draw like a heart around him right there. Virgil's done what he can this season, aside from like possibly stepping up to give Moises Caicedo a little bit more of a difficult look at goal at Stamford Bridge. But Caicedo, let's be real, is just good enough of a player where he'd have just dumped off the pass to Virgil's man and created a 2v1 with two forwards isolated against Ibu kind of at the back post, and he was out of position regardless. So yeah, I really don't have much to say on Virgil. He was obviously imperious against Newcastle. He was great against Arsenal. And he's continued to be our resolute leader in the locker room. He's registered consistent performances throughout the season. And that's something that not many Liverpool players can say at the moment. So I got to give him his flowers. I am struggling a little bit watching him and Ibu fuss around with the ball at the back, but I'd say that's probably more of a fullback and Gravenberch McAllister issue more than anything else, which we'll continue that conversation right now because Milos Kerkes is coincidentally the next person to discuss on my list. Similar to Mohamed Salah's portion from earlier in this video, let's look at some heat maps from Milos Kerkes' average performance from last season. This year is Milos Kerkes against Brentford on March 15th, 2020-25. He's getting a little bit deeper, he's receiving the ball up here as well, but a lot of his touches are deep on the pitch. Again, let's go to another one. This is Milos Kerkes against Brighton on February 25th, 2025, a couple weeks prior to that. Same positions, he's getting the ball kind of in this a third of the way up the pitch, and he's getting it at the half line, and he's getting it further down that touch line so he can make plays. And here's a heat map from one of Milos's best performances last season where he was legitimately the best player on the pitch against Tottenham. He registered an assist in that game. He was awesome. You'll see, again, same positioning. Hell, here's Milos Kerkes' heat map from this past week out on international duty. Are you noticing anything? Yeah, I bet you are noticing something. Now, let's look at how Milos Kerkes is being used on Liverpool. This first one is against Newcastle from August 25th. You'll see that he's definitely staying more in his first half. He's not really progressing deep into our attacking half. Now let's look at another one. This is him versus Arsenal, which I feel like was actually probably his best game. He had a very solid defensive performance, but again, we're not really seeing that Milos Kerkes that likes to drive forward. And now this one is more recently. This was against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. We're seeing that he's having very similar outlooks to his Bournemouth days, where he's allowed the freedom to advance down the touchline and get the ball moving forward a little bit more. Weirdly enough, that was one of Kerkes' worst performances this season, and I actually think that's a little bit more to do structurally with how he looked on the pitch as opposed to just him in general. And finally, our most recent fixture against Chelsea, in which Milos just played 55 minutes and was subbed off for Andy Robertson. While you'll see that as the season has progressed, his role has slightly progressed him a bit further up the pitch a little bit, make no mistake, this is still nowhere close to the role that Milos Kerkes was playing in at Bournemouth, nor is it the role that many of us envisioned him playing in at Liverpool. We all know this. After all, the idea of Milos Kerkes playing as a part of a slow-it-down back three feels completely opposite of what Milos Kerkes is even on this earth to do as a human. I remember him diving to the ground trying to head the ball in the corner off of a Crystal Palace player in that Community Shield just to get his possession back. I remember him slinging in tons of dangerous crosses last season while he was driving up the pitch like a maniac. I literally just saw him this weekend out-physicaling his opponents with his pace and his strength during international duty. We know that he's a dynamic threat in the final third. We know that he offers a ton of variability in the attack by being able to do things like linking up with his midfielders, linking up with his winger while his winger cuts in and he cuts outside. He's able to create a little bit of width. We know that he is excellent at maintaining that width on the pitch because of him being such a threat. But again, his inconsistent usage, as you saw in the heat maps, where his positions are all over the place, it seems like, and the fitness of the players around him, it's all preventing him from being the player that we know Milos KERKES is. And it's all there with him, guys. He's only 21 years old, too. But he, like his substitute and our vice captain Andy Robertson, have been more or less relegated to keeping that side of their game kind of on the back burner this season, where they're not really being fully utilized when they are making these runs. I mean, we're seeing Milos making these undercut runs where Gakpo cuts inside off of his right and Milos is running down the line. Very, very open, and Cody's not even looking at him. He's more so cutting in off of his right foot, taking a shot on goal, rather than dumping the ball off to Milos to make a cross into a guy like Hugo or Mohamed Salah streaking on that backside. And to make matters worse, these guys are really only breaking these traits out in situations that explicitly call for them, rather than diving deep down the pitch as they're so used to doing to create plays for other people. That said though, I think we have a pretty good reason as to why that is the case, which actually moves us to our next area of the pitch, which is actually going to make me make a substitution on here. So let's sub out Florian, Wirtz, and Alexis McAllister, right? Because this is the typical midfield three that we're used to seeing on this Liverpool side, where Gravenberch's playing kind of centrally, McAllister's off on that left-hand side a little bit more, slightly more progressed, and Szoboszlai's on that right-hand side, even more progressed, able to kind of be a box-to-box threat, similar to McAllister, but Szoboszlai just offers more road runneriness, right? So with these substitutions, I want to talk about Alexis McAllister, obviously. And he's taking quite a beating by football fans at the moment. I'm not saying it's fully warranted, as McAllister did miss his preseason, has been hampered by lingering ailments dating all the way back to the end of last season, if you remember. And I also want my feelings to be known that I rate Alexis McAllister extremely highly. He was legit one of my favorite players to watch last season. He was one of the most pivotal players to our success, and he's likely just going through a difficult patch with nagging injuries, poor fitness, and the like. But what I will say, without improvement in this spot of the pitch, right here, right in here, and maybe that spot, without improvement in that spot on the pitch, and in my opinion, the area where most of Liverpool's issues are currently stemming from, actually, Liverpool will continue to look like a big, beautiful cruise ship with all these bells and whistles and all that accoutrement. But we conveniently are forgetting to look at the sonar for the big fucking iceberg that's dead ahead of us. The spot in front of Virgil, right here, this spot where McAllister plays a little bit higher and Gravenberch is a little bit off diagonally to Virgil. This spot on the pitch is so imperative to the system and how we play our game. It's important in defensive transition, it's vital in ball progression, in possession maintenance, you name it. And Alexis McAllister has held down that position better than most could ever dream of doing in the previous few seasons, especially so in last year's Premier League winning campaign. This season, however, while we know the mentality and leadership will always remain of a guy like McAllister's caliber, his performance, like many others within the side, has just not been there this season. Without his contributions in ball progression, where he's very evidently uncomfortable at receiving the ball with his back turned toward our opponent's goal at the moment, and without his fitness where he's able to cover as an additional body to counter the opponent's transition in these crucial spots to provide someone like Milos KERKES the ability to get down the pitch and do what he does best, McAllister dropping into here, KERKES coming over here, Gakpo coming here, making little passes into there, KERKES throwing the ball up, you get what I'm saying. Without that, it kind of just feels like we're left with a team of misfit toys. You know, all have their perfect use case. We know what all of their perfect use cases are. It's just we're not really using them. And we legitimately just saw almost all of our international players being used to their maximum potential this past weekend. But right now, I feel like we just don't have the fitness around the pitch. McAllister and some of these guys in the midfield and outside, like KERKES, who's supposed to have relationship with McAllister, with Virgil. A lot of these guys are also lacking rhythm right now together, and we just don't really have the structure because of that to utilize these players. And weirdly enough, I actually do think that kind of starts with Alexis McAllister and a little bit Mohamed Salah, like I previously mentioned. And for someone who's as good with or without the ball at his feet as McAllister is, I'm personally of the opinion that it's really just a matter of time before we see the fitness levels kind of round back into shape and his comfortability with surrounding players growing a bit more, which I think will result in improvements, not only in his game, but again in guys like Milos KERKES, where KERKES will be able to get a little bit further down the pitch, and McAllister, while he's not going to be great at it, is going to be able to tuck into these spots and provide a little bit of cushion. I also think he's going to provide a lot of the same support that he offered to Cody Gakpo last season, where McAllister's able to kind of come up. Gakpo, when he cuts in, is able to use McAllister as an option over here. Because Gakpo's cutting in, maybe KERKES is dropping down, or maybe he's staying back because McAllister's a little bit higher. But again, that gives us a little bit more defensive positioning in these spaces. We just need a little bit of support, and I think a guy like Cody Gakpo would greatly benefit from this, so then Cody's not running back in transition defensively like a madman either. And let's say somebody like Florian Wirtz comes in for Gakpo. I also think McAllister's going to make Wirtz's life a little bit easier, along with Hugo Ekitike or Alexander Isak, wherever Isak is. Any of these two guys, I think, will have their lives made a lot easier by McAllister. I think the connection with Wirtz is going to make his life easier. Granted, I don't necessarily see McAllister and Wirtz being guys that are going to bed in perfectly together just because of the way that they play the game. I don't think they're the most complementary players of one another, but I do think that he will be able to help a guy like Wirtz and a guy like Ekitike, because both of these guys are coming up the pitch very, very high to receive the ball. If a guy like McAllister's in a little bit better shape, he's probably going to be able to progress the ball a little bit better carrying. He's probably going to be making a little bit better passes. He's probably going to be more comfortable receiving the ball right here as well, which he's not doing a ton of. So Wirtz isn't going to have to come up to get the ball from a guy like Gravenberch or KERKES over here passing here, or Virgil coming into him. Instead, Wirtz will be able to kind of sit in his position as a 10 between lines. If he's coming off the left wing, he'll obviously be playing in a left wing role, but he will definitely drift more centrally like we know he likes to do. McAllister will be able to make a quick little turn, and Wirtz will be somewhere sneaking behind the lines, and then you're going to be able to have this play where McAllister's able to get it up to Wirtz. KERKES maybe will bomb a little bit forward. Same goes with Ekitike as well. I think with Wirtz over here and a guy like Ekitike, he's not going to have to drop to the midfield to come get the ball. He's just going to have a lot more options. But full transparency, guys, I'm not necessarily sure that I look at Alexis McAllister as the most perfect profile fit, even when he is at his most fit. It's a triangle hole in a square peg, you know what I mean? In that role I just laid out, where he's able to do these things like drop back a little bit to provide cushion for KERKES, or jump forward to provide a little bit of support for a guy like Gakpo or Wirtz or Ekitike. That is required in that position, I think, on this side. So I'm really interested to continue watching this spot on the pitch specifically, just to see how the role develops, because it will need to develop provided that McAllister is our long-term fit in that position. Now, does this also mean that Curtis Jones is probably going to get a little bit more playtime? Probably. And honestly, I'm totally good with that. I like Curtis Jones. I believe he already does do a good job spelling Alexis McAllister when needed. I think he definitely provides that ability to drop back a little bit. We've seen him playing right back, so it's not like he's fully uncomfortable taking on transitioning wingers, I wouldn't say. So a guy like KERKES might have a little more freedom to bomb forward when Curtis was on the pitch. Curtis can also progress the ball forward via passing or carrying. He's shown that he's very comfortable doing those things. So hopefully we're able to spell McAllister and give these guys similar time on the pitch, just using them interchangeably, because I think if we're able to do that, we're just going to create a little bit more looks for the defense to have to worry about. And if worst case scenario comes to worst case scenario, at the very least, we get a good idea of what profile we absolutely need in that position. Because I also know that there are a few names floating around right now that would fit into that role much more naturally, much more seamlessly than a guy like McAllister would. For right now, though, I'm going to back McAllister, as once again, time together is kind of the most important element for this team right now. Now let's get Curtis back out of there, get McAllister back in here. I'm going to keep Wirtz over on this left side because that's actually kind of coming up a little bit. Now I want to mention Ryan Gravenberch because he is also in a relatively weird spot in my eyes that I don't feel like is being talked about enough because of how good he has been this season. He feels like a legitimate focal point within the side, and honestly, he seems like he's become a top 5 midfielder in the Premier League. He's that good. I never thought that I would be saying that about him. Even last season when he was at his heights, I did not think I would be saying that about him, but he is showing yet again why he is so good. However, I mentioned that he's in a weird spot because while Ryan Gravenberch has taken his game to new levels, I weirdly think these new highs, especially in offensive contribution, might be partially to the long-term detriment of this current iteration of the Liverpool squad. The way he has largely been deployed, being asked to play more box-to-box this season than last season, almost as a left-sided 8, is both simultaneously helping Liverpool and killing Liverpool all at the same time. He's obviously offering more of an offensive contribution than we ever expected out of a 6, already registering a couple of goals, linking up quite a bit in the final third. However, when we are dispossessed when he's playing in this position, which has been a lot due to the lack of cohesion and the rhythm, this box-to-box implementation is finding Liverpool's should-be 6 in a very uncomfortable position that makes it nearly impossible for him to get back to defend. With McAllister's lacking fitness as well, and with KERKES kind of being in a no man's land headspace at the moment, the lack of defensive transition, not only on Konate's side, but also now on Virgil's side, is very alarming. It's why that McAllister conversation that we just had is so important. Without a 6 constantly in this 6 position to offer a little bit more resistance, we're way more susceptible in transition. Now granted, we have seen him splitting a back 3 a little bit more often in recent weeks rather than driving aggressively forward and contributing in offense. But again, it's the lack of consistency in his usage and his positioning that I am worrying about very much so. I'm also slightly worried that teams have actually started to figure Ryan Gravenberch out a little bit, and let me explain that. We all know that he's shown an incredible aptitude to beat the defender within his pockets with like crafty half turns and clever dribbles, but we also know that he's not really a terrific passing progressor of the ball by any stretch. So what teams are doing, let's just get a defender out here. When Gravenberch is getting the ball, it used to be last season where Gravenberch would receive, and immediately upon the pass being made, so once Virgil or Robertson or somebody got the ball into KERKES, the defender would immediately jump up, Gravenberch would be able to make the spin and just blow by his guy, leaving this guy in the dust, requiring another defender up here to step forward, creating more space in behind him, which allowed Gravenberch a little bit of passing freedom. But what we're seeing this year, instead of what we saw last year, is when these passes are being made, the trigger isn't on the pass being made, but it's rather once Gravenberch actually makes this turn and faces upfield that the defense starts triggering down toward him, providing pressure on him. Which obviously that has created a tremendous amount of issues in Liverpool's build-up play, which is, if you look over here at our takeaways, it's the number 1 takeaway, the poor progressive passing during build-up. Now again, sort of like I said in the Alexis McAllister segment, I'm kind of unsure what the future plan is for transfers regarding the midfield and or line-breaking progressors, but I know the current style of play that our midfield is being set up to play alongside these fullbacks and these center backs, it just doesn't perfectly click together. Everyone within the side has proven that they're capable of being incredible assets to this club or to other clubs, but the usage right now is a little bit troubling. Instead of the 6 that he's used to playing in, we have Gravenberch kind of playing more as a left-sided 8, box-to-box, which should be the role of Dominic Szoboszlai on the right-hand side, which it has been, but he's also been playing as a right back. So there has been a lack of consistency in both of these spots. Both Szoboszlai's spots going from here to up here, and Gravenberch, where he's slotting into a back three or he's playing as a box-to-box 8. We also have McAllister playing sort of everywhere and nowhere all at the same time, looking lost and getting caught in uncomfortable spots both in and out of possession because of both his positioning and also because of his fitness-related lack of rhythm. We have Wirtz as a 10, but dropping much deeper into the midfield because we lack build-up because of, yet again, the positioning and usage of our midfielders. We have KERKES not really driving forward like he's meant to because of his surrounding players' lack of fitness and their poor positioning, nor is KERKES really offering much in build-up play because his own body positioning upon receiving passes from guys like Virgil van Dijk has been very much in question if you've been watching any videos the last couple of weeks. Then on the backside of all of that, we have Bradley and Frimpong basically on a coin flip basis, so there's very little consistency on that side, period, and both have also been without full fitness. It's kind of like we found 8 connectable pieces of a puzzle that click together perfectly, but no matter how perfectly fitting that final 9th piece smack dab of the puzzle might look, it clicks in just a little bit off, and then you realize that that last piece is like part of a totally different puzzle and it's not the right piece at all. And then all of the pieces just break apart and now none of your 8 or 9 pieces are even remotely assembled. And for now, just right now, all of this is okay, provided that Arne is able to make the correct tactical adjustments, which I feel he will find in time. And there's that word again, guys. Time. And weirdly enough, when I think about time and its beautifully intricate inner workings lately, based on how much I listen to football media and punditry, I immediately think about Florian Wirtz and Liverpool's attack because in my eyes, that's the most matter of time shit I think I've ever seen in my life. This will probably be the longest portion of this video because there's just been an extraordinary amount of conversation surrounding Florian Wirtz since Liverpool purchased him for a record-breaking bit of business all the way back in June. I think immediately every non-Liverpool and non-Leverkusen fan kind of hoped for a Wirtz slump, to be honest. Teams like Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Manchester City, they all missed out on Wirtz's services, so large fan bases like theirs globally obviously were going to chime in. And then every fan of a Premier League team outside of Anfield's grounds obviously enjoys hating on Liverpool, and with Liverpool being the defending champions from last season, it was kind of only natural that the conversations of Liverpool are buying the league would start when we broke the British transfer record. And then again when we did it 2 months later. The only way that Wirtz was not going to receive this kind of criticism, I think, was if he stepped in and immediately delivered an abundance of goals and assists, which he's just not thus far. But does that not also beg the question of which 10 maybe besides Kevin De Bruyne has come into the Premier League from a different league and immediately started balling out? Think about it. It's a really difficult position to get the mastery of, especially when betting yourself in with new teammates, especially teammates who themselves are not used to playing alongside a 10. It's also a really difficult playing in the 10 when you go from a league like the Bundesliga with a lot more open space, a lot more movement to operate, into the Premier League where lines are so much more compact, midfields are way more organized, and they're way more full of aggressive physical ball winners. All of this said, however, I think anyone openly saying that Wirtz has been a disappointment this season is actually sort of like failing to project their actual thoughts, which are that Liverpool have been a disappointment so far this season. Because the two actually sort of go hand in hand, and let me explain how. Liverpool's expectations upon their signing of Florian Wirtz increased exponentially because Wirtz is that good of a player. You bring in an offensive force to go alongside another offensive force like Mohamed Salah, and immediately everyone looks at the offensive side of the ball and thinks this is going to be unstoppable. They don't, however, think about anything like supporting cast continuity and on-pitch relationships and cohesion or team structure or build-up play. Did any of you think we were going to have issues in build-up play this year? Like, I didn't. It's easy to forget about these things when excitement is in the air, and Wirtz is exciting. Wirtz was brought in, and all anyone could talk about was the firepower, but it's also like everyone kind of missed the summit of gunpowder and how to load the musket. You know what I mean? all anybody could talk about were the names and the heights that these names mixed with the existing names on the roster could possibly reach. But to say that someone like Florian Wirtz has been disappointing without acknowledging that he's being used extremely unconventionally in comparison to his typical style, and the many chances that he has created are just not being clinically put away, I kind of think it says more about the person saying this stuff about Florian Wirtz than it does about Florian Wirtz himself. If anything, I'm actually more disappointed by the supporting cast around in the usage of Wirtz than I am with Wirtz in general. Let's look at some heat maps to kind of show you what I mean, starting with his seasonal heat map from last season, which is going to look like an unhygienic 12-year-old's face because look at all that red. My God, man. Like, every time I look at this, it's crazy to me. Very clearly a lot of action on that left side. A lot of deadly playmaking was done in the left half space. Obviously, a very good portion of work was done on that right side as well. And that obviously just alludes to the fact that Wirtz drifted all around the pitch and was able to create from just about anywhere he could with Bayer Leverkusen. Also, he had a good bit of box presence. Let me just pull that back up. He had a lot of box presence right over in here, right on the outside of the box too, and just a ton of overall action in that final third in general. A little bit of deep dropping, obviously, to come pick the ball up and link up play with his wingback, Jeremie Frimpong, quite often, as a matter of fact, in that Leverkusen system. But an overwhelming majority of his work, as you can see here, again, came in that final third. Now let's compare that usage with his usage in this year's World Cup qualifiers, where he's been one of Germany's best players. Unsurprisingly, most of his action, again, is off the left-hand side in that final third. Let me just take this away, bring my board back, move Gakpo over here because he doesn't play for Germany. So Wirtz obviously is doing a tremendous amount of work over in this space for Germany right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that on the right side, they are very comfortable and he's not really being asked to play in that 10 role in the first place. On that side, typically is Jamal Musiala, who plays the right-sided 10, so both of those guys command their side of the pitch. Musiala obviously went down earlier this season with the Achilles or ACL injury, I forget what it was, hoping he gets better soon because he's awesome. But they also still have Adeyemi and Gnabry comfortably playing off that side, and a strong system's already in place, so Wirtz can own that left side all he wants, and he's not going to drift too far right just because they know the system very well. And now let's look at his seasonal heat map for Liverpool. Obviously, it definitely looks a little more akin to his Bayer Leverkusen heat map because, like I said, the Germany situation is just very much left side centric. And granted, this should also be taken with a little pinch of salt anyways. This is just his Premier League heat map this season, and he's only played 7 total games so far, and he's only started in 5 of them. But if you give it a look, you'll notice that while he is still doing a healthy amount of his work in this final half and mostly this third quarter of the pitch right here in these half spaces, there's still very little box presence in comparison to what he was used to, and he's also dropping pretty deep into the midfield to receive the ball right now. He's just coming up here. He's getting the ball super high, and he's turning and trying to create this way. The problem is, however, Wirtz usually plays in these half spaces. So the way that I'm looking at it, I'd say with Liverpool thus far, based on this map and just watching him as closely as possible during Liverpool fixtures, he's kind of felt like more of a middle 50% of the pitch player than a final 50% of the pitch player. What's unconventional about this, from Wirtz's perspective, is that Wirtz is really kind of used to playing in the half spaces between midfielders and behind center backs, so he likes to roam in here. He does not typically do this, where he comes up, even higher sometimes, receives the ball, and then turns with the ball to face these midfielders here. He's usually going up against defenders that are a little less able to keep up with his pace, but when he's up in this high area of the pitch, just based on his fitness right now, he's running into high midfield situations where he's going up against very physical, very aggressive ball-winning players, which is why he's getting dispossessed like he is. I just think he's kind of feeling the game out. He's getting his rhythm in. He's getting his legs going. I think we're going to see much better in the future out of him, but as of right now, I think he's just betting into the system. I also want to mention that Wirtz has looked much better in Champions League competition as well due to just increased space and time around him. So when that space is opened up, when it's manufactured for him, or when he's able to create it for himself, Wirtz, as we know, is a chance-creating machine. He's already created 21 total chances across all competitions this season. In Premier League competitions, he's averaging 2 chances created per game, while averaging about 3.5 per match in the Champions League, which is very good. Obviously, a pretty big delta there between the two, but make no mistake about it, Wirtz is getting guys looks, and he's also creating some for himself as well. We've also already seen Wirtz develop a pretty stellar connection with Hugo Ekitike that'll definitely continue to grow, and that connection with Alexander Isak's also showing promise. As their first start together against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, we saw some really nice connectivity and interplay between the two of them. However, the Gakpo Salah situations have not yet fully developed, I wouldn't say, because they're just a little bit more spread out, and Wirtz obviously likes to operate in those half spaces and get into the box rather than on the outside of the box where our wingers are kind of situated. So of course most of his interplay is going to come with the center forward that's directly in front of him. But even more importantly than the Gakpo and Salah relationships not really developing yet, the relationships behind Flo haven't developed either, which is kind of where we're seeing the biggest issue. That's why he's dropping a little bit deeper. There's very little reason for someone as proficient in the final half as Florian Wirtz is to be dropping into our own territory to collect the ball and then be tasked with taking out a midfield, again, full of defenders. But unfortunately, based on these things I keep mentioning, like player fitness and positioning and their usage, Wirtz is being asked to roam a little bit more regularly to collect the ball because we're just struggling mightily to build it up into his preferred spots. And again, like I said, that's why when he comes up here and he turns, he's just more likely to be dispossessed. He's battling against physical defenders more often than he would be if you were playing as a true between-the-lines playmaking 10, where he's able to catch the ball, turn, diagnose what's going on in front of him, and make a play from there. Hence why I feel like a lot of fans and a lot of non-fans of his are heavy on the criticism at the moment. And again, I do hesitate to say that the manager's failing him, because let's be real, like it was Arne Slot's plan for Wirtz that attracted Wirtz to Liverpool in the first place. And again, there are a lot of players not fully fit or lacking rhythm at the moment, so consistent structuring has not been a privilege that this Liverpool club has. And I think of all the players on the team, guys like Florian Wirtz is suffering from this the most, despite still providing us with a tremendous amount of excitement in many moments this season, despite not really finishing or capitalizing on them. Does Florian Wirtz need to bulk up a bit, get more physically acclimated to the pace and aggression of the league? Yeah, for sure. But so does literally every non-Premier League player when they transition into the Premier League. If I'm not mistaken, I remember hearing that Bernardo Silva took time to acclimate to the intensity of the Premier League when he joined Manchester City from Monaco. And over the years, would you not say that Bernardo Silva has become one of the most quintessential Premier League players we can think of? You know what I mean? Like, again, it's the time, guys. It's time. And with that time and the development of this Liverpool side, I think Florian Wirtz will become one of those guys we talk about in like 5 or 10 years. And many of us are just going to be like, I told you so. I told you. But now to round out the Liverpool look around, I kind of just want to talk about the other primary attackers in front of Florian Wirtz. So I'm going to talk about Cody Gakpo, Federico Chiesa, Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike. You'll notice I left Rio and Ngumoha out of that sentence, and that's because he's a child, guys. Rio and Ngumoha is a child, so any contributions we get from Rio, even though he's a first-team player, are amazing. And I have truly loved watching him develop this season, and I think we should just allow that to blossom naturally. I do not want to put too much pressure on this kid. He's 16 or 17 years old. He just turned 17. Like, what an exciting future that kid has, and what an exciting future we therefore get to look forward to blossoming. So let's just be happy he's ours, guys. So to start, I think we need to address the not so subtle elephant in the room of Federico Chiesa and Cody Gakpo. You know what I mean? I think that's a pretty reasonable place to start looking at. I'm someone who thinks Gakpo has actually provided a bit more than others are saying, personally speaking. But that said, like, Federico Chiesa is showing us all that he's beyond capable of playing meaningful minutes within the Premier League. In 2 of those 6 matches he's played this season, Fedi scored a match winner and an equalizer in the final minutes of those games, and he's also registered a couple assists. Like, we can't ask for much more. He's also shown that he has a ton of energy in the press, which is something that, as I have mentioned, we are greatly lacking because of the departures from last summer. And in some of these pressing moments, he's even won the ball back and like immediately turned around, squared the ball into somebody for a shot on goal. That's how Isak scored his first and only goal with the club so far. So based on my brief history of watching this club, Federico kind of seems like a quintessential Liverpool player, and I don't think I stand alone when I say that, and I feel like he definitely deserves more game time. I am not, however, saying that he deserves to start more regularly than Cody Gakpo, I don't think. Does Federico deserve to start in 35 to 40% of the matches? Yeah, probably, but I don't think he should completely overtake Cody Gakpo. That said, Fedi's form has been excellent to start this campaign. We all know that. And Cody still needs to bet into that combination with Wirtz, and especially with Milos KERKES on these overlaps and underlaps. You know, these have been severely lacking. And I think somebody like Federico Chiesa, while he's out here, is going to, if KERKES is underlapping with him, is going to be more prone to look for this pass. I also think Chiesa might be a little bit more prone to pass out of here to reset, get everybody back in good position, and restart the offense. I do, however, think that Cody has been pretty good offensively this season, obviously. Like, he's scored a couple of goals, he's been involved, he's made a couple of nice passes, he's been very consistent. I don't know if that consistency, based on where he's at, is up to Liverpool's standards, but he has been consistent and he has provided some spark plug moments. So with that being the case, I think he's been pretty okay offensively, still providing these goal threats off the left wing. And even defensively, and sometimes in the press, most notably, I kind of noticed it against Chelsea in our previous match, where he was never dribbled past, and he had a few moments where teammates were kind of able to like curve their runs nicely to block off passing lanes, which is something that Mohamed Salah's been having to do quite a bit this season. But teammates were kind of like curving these passing lanes, you know what I mean? Just getting in front of passing lanes. And Gakpo was able to be on the other end of a pass from a Chelsea player and able to intercept it pretty easily, which he did a couple of times, and that was able to spring us forward into a counterattack. It didn't bear any fruit, but the more bites you get at the apple, the better off you're going to be, right? And I'm not saying his pressing has been at the level that Luis Diaz's was from last season. I don't think anybody could really be at that level, but Cody still has something going on there that does not fully rule him out of this side for me. I just think that Chiesa and Gakpo, or like Chiesa and Mo Salah, could be used a bit more interchangeably just to get someone in good form with a lot of energy on the pitch more often. Regardless though, I do think Cody's having a decent season and is probably just under a bit more of a microscope because of how everything else around him looks, and because of how Fedi's taken everyone by surprise and become adored by the Liverpool fan base. Again, this is a matter of time and positioning. Bring Cody closer to the box, into here, so Milos is able to maintain width when need be, keep the team consistent, let the players figure out the rhythm with their neighbor on the pitch, and things will likely start looking a little bit better. And speaking of better, how about our guy Hugo Ekitike? I'm not even sure what I'm referring to when I say speaking of better, but yeah, Hugo Ekitike probably is just better based on everything we're seeing out of him. Literally 0 notes. Aside from his like semi-boneheaded double yellow against Southampton, he has been one of the very few consistent bright spots within this side this year. His link-up play when he drops deep is sensational. I don't know if you remember, but I think it wasn't Gravenberch because he was suspended for the Crystal Palace Community Shield match. It might have been Szoboszlai or somebody, but they passed it into Wirtz. And Wirtz just kind of like dumped the ball off to, it was more closer to midfield. And then Wirtz dumped the ball off to Ekitike. And then Ekitike just like on a one touch did like a little Magic Johnson like, and like heel clicked it back to Wirtz, which sprung Wirtz forward, and it might have been Szoboszlai, but somebody was running alongside, and then Wirtz started pushing for, like, it was sensational. I have no idea how someone as big and as lanky as Hugo Ekitike is also as fluid and effortless with the ball at his feet as he is. And honestly, like, he was the new addition that I had the most reservations on, despite my excitement of possibly adding him to the team, dating all the way back to like mid-April, peep the screenshots. But I did not see this coming. Like, nobody did. He's fucking unbelievable, man. I would do anything for. I love Hugo Ekitike. He can have my foot if he needs it. Like, he's the man. He has seemingly over the last 2 months become one of the 10 best strikers in the world. His style, like I mentioned, fits so well with Florian Wirtz already. They're already showing their ability to link up deeper. I can't wait to see what it looks like when those two guys start getting more used to the situation in the Premier League and they're able to link up a little closer to the goal. It's going to look gross, and that's going to be a partnership that we're talking about for many years to come, and I legitimately just cannot wait to watch it. And I also think the same can be said for Alexander Isak as well. You know, like, he, like many others within the side, also missed a preseason, and we're therefore trying to get him acclimated to the team as well without rushing him in too quickly. But we're already seeing moments of individual brilliance, instinctual shot creation, and occasional link-up play, mostly in that left half space with Florian Wirtz. Again, like I mentioned, they were really fun to watch together against Atletico Madrid. There wasn't like a ton of chances created, but just seeing it, you know what I mean? Like, just seeing them getting used to one another was really, really exciting. And even though Isak's only netted 1 goal for us, like I mentioned, that Federico turnaround, beautiful pass back, even though he's only netted 1 goal, he's already almost created a handful of others, like, seemingly out of nowhere. That little, like, trip-up situation against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park where he almost buried it in the back corner. Like, it looked like he was just stumbling to the ground, and then he was able to just rocket one. He had one earlier in the season, I think it was like Southampton maybe, where it was like the first minute of the game he had a shot on goal. Like, he's had a couple of almost moments. There's just a tremendous amount of promise that Isak is just not too far away from fully rounding into shape. Similarly to many other players on the pitch, however, when Isak has been on, it feels as though we're not really putting him in strong enough positions to succeed based on the lack of rhythm and cohesion around him. Liverpool's progression of the ball has obviously been a big focal point in this video, and it really does culminate in how few touches Alexander Isak is getting. You can argue that Hugo Ekitike is getting more touches, but when you look at Hugo's seasonal heat map right here, you'll find that Ekitike is someone who just simply drops deep a little more regularly to link up with midfielders, whereas Isak certainly has that ability, but he knows his strong suit is not so much in carrying the ball from a deep position, though he's obviously pretty damn good at it, as it is roaming in that final third and being an instinctual out-and-out bagsman. Granted, his heat map's not glowing by any stretch, but this map highlights only 180 minutes played in the Premier League this season, accounting for only 60 total touches. But the point stands. He's here to score goals. He knows this. Everybody around him knows this. But it all does go back to a more progressive system, doesn't it, guys? Like, you take Gakpo out here and you maybe put Wirtz on the left so there's a little bit more ball control on the wing. You bring McAllister back in or Curtis Jones. Let's just throw Curtis Jones in here, guys. Szoboszlai up here, Gravenberch, Curtis back here. Say that you're running this system. It's all about ball progression. If Liverpool played in a more ball progressive via passing system, yet a more cushioned system like a guy like Curtis Jones is able to provide at the moment, where players weren't so afraid to be countered due to comfortability in possession, we would see players like Florian Wirtz come into these spaces and touch the ball 71 times instead of 51. Because a guy like Wirtz is getting more possession on the ball, and because a guy like Curtis Jones is able to drop a little deeper, making KERKES' runs a little bit more possible, making Frimpong a little bit more dangerous on the backside, allowing Gravenberch to split a little bit. You know what I mean? Allowing these guys to be in positions that they like being in, you're not only going to get Wirtz the ball a little bit more. Because of this, You're also probably going to see Alexander Isak's touches go up from his sub-20 average on the season, somewhere around the 35 to 40 mark. Hugo Ekitike's touches might stay around the same, but his touches would likely be of higher quality rather than a larger chunk of them coming from dropping deep and having to play 1-2 in the midfield, because you're getting the ball progressed more quickly, so he's not having to do that. It's simple math. The concept is basic. Get the ball in playmakers' hands more often or quicker, and better things will tend to happen in the final third. Clearly, we're seeing it's not that simple. But yeah, it really sort of is pretty simple. Also, I know I briefly skipped over him. I just really wanted to quickly talk about Mamadarshvili, Alisson. I think they've been awesome. Like, Alisson this season, before he went down, was probably one of our 3 most impactful players. There were multiple instances where he saved us big time. If not for him, it's probably a 6-0 drubbing at Selhurst Park, you know? And then obviously, like, Ibrahima Konate having the little gaff where Alisson has to step a little bit further out. Like, all of these things, every single thing boils down to these issues we're talking about, you know? Like the poor positioning and the poor fitness and rhythm and the lack of cohesion. Like, even Alisson's injury can boil down to something as simple as that if he did not have to step up like he did. Now, also, with that being the case, like, Mamadarshvili has also shown that he's been awesome. He was solid against Chelsea. It was at the 9-minute, 20-second mark. If you're able to go rewatch that game, go watch this outlet pass. It's absurd. I literally had no idea that Giorgi had that in his locker, and I am very much looking forward to watching that a little bit more as the season goes on. Obviously, I want Alisson to get back as quickly as possible, but I do think we're very blessed to have a guy like Giorgi behind him, and I think we're going to continue to see very good goalkeeping play throughout the course of the season. Thank God. So now that we basically rounded out the entire team and diagnosed a lot of the issues, I kind of just want to jam all that information together real quickly to create what I think could work based on the current team configuration. For right now, I think it might look something like this. It might develop in the near future based on like fitness and stuff like that. But for right now, I think it kind of looks a little something like this. I think with Wirtz on the left wing, take Gakpo off, take Chiesa out of the system. We saw this a little bit against Crystal Palace. It wasn't super effective, but the issue that I thought we were seeing is we were seeing Szoboszlai kind of creeping up more so into like a dual 10 situation where Isak and Salah were like obviously getting a little bit more split, but still staying kind of wide. And then you had like Szoboszlai able to make these runs, and Salah and Isak were able to do these things, but it kind of congested the space a little bit for Wirtz. So what I'm thinking, you have Wirtz off this left side where he is able to collect the ball. He's super comfortable receiving the ball on the left. It's his favored spot. So let's just stick him over there. And then if he wants to drift inland, he can drift. He's allowed to do that. He's that good. And then all that'll do is it'll just drive Isak and it'll drive Salah a little bit into more comfortable positions that they're used to. You know, Isak's really good off this left side. Salah's extremely potent right off this corner, as we talked about quite a bit earlier. So I think that's kind of a really nice way to round out the attack. What that also does is it allows us to have this midfield 3. It allows Gravenberch to stay back here and play in the 6 role that we know he's really freaking good at. He's going to have to improve his ball progression via passing. We all know that. But I think this will be a development that the team makes throughout the season. So I think Gravenberch's most likely going to be hanging out in this 6 position a little bit more frequently than he has been. What that does then is with Gravenberch being able to split, you're able to have Konate go a little out. You're able to have Virgil go a little out. You're able to push KERKES a little bit up. And McAllister in here, let's say that he's able to do this. Currently, I don't think his fitness is really there. He's also not really a super athletic player who's going to be able to cover wings at a high level. So let's just say that like interchangeably, it's him and Curtis Jones. You know what I mean? Let's just like put those two guys together. So if they're able to cover these spots in here, if they're able to cover deep, while KERKES goes forward, when he does go forward, if these guys are able to cover these spots, KERKES can do what he needs to do. It allows Wirtz to come in. It allows KERKES to go out here. It allows him to have link-up play with Isak. It allows Wirtz to get the ball out into this position over here for KERKES to throw in one of these crosses to one of these guys. It allows Szoboszlai to come a little bit forward. Because of this, it'll naturally push Mo in. I think Frimpong will also be playing a little bit higher up because of this system. Let's just move all of these guys up, obviously, because that's what it would look like. So I think you're going to be having these like back three situations with a guy like Curtis or a guy like McAllister behind KERKES. KERKES getting forward, doing what he's best at. He'll be able to play these interchanges with Wirtz. Wirtz, when he's in the center, is going to be able to do whatever the hell he wants because we've seen him do whatever the hell he wants. It might also allow Szoboszlai to make these little deep cutting runs, which we know that he's super comfortable doing. It could allow Frimpong to make these little runs over here. There's just a lot of optionality. Swing it over to this side. McAllister gets it over to Szoboszlai. And then Szoboszlai is able to get it into Salah. And Frimpong's making a cut this way. Szoboszlai is able to drop. McAllister and those guys are able to come to the middle. KERKES is able to go a little lower. Wirtz can kind of start creeping over here. Salah can make his passes into Frimpong. He can make a little connection with Isak up top, where Isak's able to make a pass down to Frimpong. Maybe Wirtz gets involved on the backside. There's just a lot of optionality, as you guys can see, and I think it does a lot of things regarding covering our bases, because a lot of our bases just aren't covered right now. Unfortunately, I just kind of think playing Florian Wirtz in this left wing role, even though he wasn't brought in to be a left winger, he was brought in to be a 10, I think putting him there is the best situation, because we can kind of just say that he's not really a left winger like he is. He can operate as a left winger, but we know what he's going to do. He's going to be drifting in. He's going to be creating space for Salah and Isak to operate, or Salah and Ekitike, or Isak and Ekitike, or whoever's up there. You know what I mean? He's going to be able to make these little interplays in the middle of the pitch where he's just drifting and he's getting the ball and he's doing whatever he wants, like he's comfortable doing. So he might not be the 10 in between the lines positionally speaking, but this 4-3-3 system allows us to have our three best midfielders on the pitch, or our three most fit midfielders on the pitch, so we're not being outnumbered in the midfield, which I think is kind of the issue we're seeing with the 4-2-3-1. Now, later on, provided some players do round back into fitness, or ideally if some roster personnel changes are made, I wouldn't be totally against moving back to a 4-2-3-1. But it would require, like I said, some significant changes to the current iteration of the 4-2-3-1 that Arne Slot has the team playing. Let's just sub Hugo back into here, get Isak off the pitch, because I just want to see Hugo's name up there. This guy right here, this little red dot, let's say he's the guy from Brighton. What we have here is the 4-2-3-1, as we obviously know it currently, but tactically, personnel-wise, it's going to look and function a lot better because of this guy right here, this guy from Brighton or from Crystal Palace. If it's the guy from Brighton, KERKES is able to do whatever the hell he wants. Brighton boy can do whatever he wants in this spot because we know that he's able to cover this position. We know that he's able to go here. We know that he's able to carry the ball forward. We know that he's able to pass the ball in between the lines pretty effectively. So it just allows a lot more freedom for Milos KERKES, which is exactly what he was brought in to do. So these little personnel changes that we could make could immediately start changing what the team looks like. Now let's say this guy is one of the guys who plays for Crystal Palace. I don't know who that is. Again, similar to the guy from Brighton, you have a double pivot back here of Gravenberch and Palace Playa. Palace Playa 22 was his screen name on AIM. Let's say it's him. You know, we have a double pivot back here where Mr. Crystal Palace boy, who's an absolute wizard, is going to be able to zero issues move the ball forward, which is one of our biggest issues right now. He might not be as great defensively dropping back as Mr. Brighton man, but he's still serviceable enough to do it because he's used to playing in this defensive center midfield role. I mean, he's more used to that than a guy like McAllister or a guy like Curtis Jones, even though Curtis Jones can do it a little better than Alexis McAllister. Again, this is another one of those guys who allows KERKES to drive further up the pitch. It's a guy who allows Wirtz to not have to drive so deep up the pitch to come get the ball because he's going to be able to get the ball into him. It's also a guy who, replacing Trent Alexander-Arnold being such a big deal, would be a huge get because we know his range of passing is fantastic, as we literally just saw it 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So I think personnel-wise, that's kind of why I was mentioning like the Alexis McAllister and Ryan Gravenberch stuff. You know, it's kind of why I was talking about that, because there are these little personnel changes that do intrigue me as a Liverpool fan. I'm going to back my guys currently because that's what I need to do. These are players that won us the Premier League last season. They're guys that didn't have much of a preseason. They're guys that are dealing with incorporating brand new, not just teammates, but like best players on their team throughout every course of their life teammates. You know, like these guys are the best players on the pitch everywhere they've ever been beside Liverpool. You know, so they're playing with superstar teammates, a gaggle of them now. So a lot of people are still getting used to it. And on top of that, I do trust Arne Slot. I think that's kind of where I want to wrap it up. A lot of talk is being made about Arne Slot, hashtag slot out, hashtag whatever. You know what I mean? There's a lot of talk. And I just want to say to you guys that for whatever reason that talk is coming out of your mouth, you gotta stop it. You just gotta stop it. This is the first time this guy has ever lost 3 games in a row. Ever, managerially. Do you know how preposterous that is? I have utmost confidence in this man. We are where we are. We're asking questions. I'm making a however long minute video this is. You know, I'm losing my mind. I don't even know what time it is right now because I've been doing this so long. I started the video and it was light and it's dark. It's really dark. It's been dark for a while. So I've been up here for a minute. All I'm saying though, we got to lighten up a little bit on Arne Slot. He won us the Premier League last season amidst really difficult situations. We had 3 possible departures of cornerstone members of the club. 2 of them stayed, 1 of them left. We're currently very much missing the one that left, and the 2 guys that stayed are the leaders within the clubhouse. And he dealt with the most difficult situation Liverpool has been faced with in quite some time this past summer with the Diogo Jota situation. And every single time he comes in to step up and handle a situation, he handles it with the most class that you can think of. He handles it in the perfect way. So I just want to say that all of this talk about him, I back him tremendously no matter what in this situation. Now, obviously, if things do continue to look this way, despite players showing this past international break that they're starting to round into form, if things do continue to look this way, I'm first going to be looking at personnel because it is personnel. We've discussed the personnel as recently as 3 minutes ago. The personnel is a little bit of the issue, and it's crazy to say that after winning the Prem last season and spending $450 million this season. But we also lost $250 million worth of players as well who offered a tremendous amount. In the press, in the attack, they were very important guys. So let's not act like that's not the case. I think we just need to lighten up on Arne Slot. We need to give him a little bit more time. If things continue to go poorly, like I mentioned, the first thing I'm going to be looking at is the personnel. But after a year, 2 years, if personnel is changed over and things are still looking weird, then yeah, of course I'll be like, this Arne Slot guy. But we have to consider that this is his first time managing Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk, Florian Wirtz, Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike, Milos KERKES, Ibrahima Konate, Ryan Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister, Cody Gakpo. Like, let's give him a little bit of grace, guys. Let's give him his flowers too, because he deserves a tremendous amount of respect for what he's already brought to this organization and for what he will continue to bring to this organization, because I have a really good feeling that all of these players that came into this team this past summer probably would not have done so if they did not think the world of Arne Slot. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up, guys. That's where I'm going to wrap it up. I think I'm done. I think I'm over this video. I think I need to go to bed. Again, no clue what time it is. Give Arne Slot some time. Give the boys a little bit of love. We got Manchester United coming up on the weekend. It's obviously a super important game. If we lose that game, that might be bad. But I have a really good feeling because Ruben Amorim's super stringent in his tactics. He really wants to stay in that same formation, and I just think we're probably going to have a little bit better chance exposing it this year than we did last season. But now I'm feeling it like I'm in a much better headspace about the team after doing this, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you guys did, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Go follow the socials. You'll see the social on the screen. But I gotta go, guys. I'm whooped. Look forward to the Man United game this weekend. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please leave a comment below because I really want to know your guys' thoughts on system, on personnel, on deployment, on player usage. I want to know your guys' thoughts on all of this stuff. So like I said, leave a comment below. I'm done talking. Good night. Goodbye. Adios. See ya.